answer the question on your plans for Thanksgiving. So I'm making plans for that lecture. If you don't see why anyone wouldn't be here Wednesday afternoon, evening before Thanksgiving, please check that if you plan to be there. But if you absolutely have already made plans and don't plan to be here, let me know so I can decide how important that lecture is to us all. Okay. Okay, so today we're going to do the following. We'll hand back the midterm, and that's in quotes because it's been handed back electronically. We'll go over that. Then we'll start talking about the front end a little more, how to use HTML5 and JavaScript. And so we'll take a little diversion away from the back end to set up how JavaScript is this really amazing, powerful language you can do all sorts of interesting things in.
Professor, can I ask you a question? I have problems with grade scope. Maybe I'm not the only one. Somebody can say. The latest grade that I have was for PS3. Nothing's been posted starting for PS4 onward. No other grades for PS4 5 as well.
PS4 should be there. I will check after class. PS5 we are behind on. We haven't graded. PS6 is due today. Right. And I told the TAs let's focus on getting the midterm back right away rather than PS5. So PS5 not graded. PS4 I will check after class.
It doesn't show graded on.
Okay, then I must not have hit the button on that. Yes.
So on this most recent assignment, when I submitted it on Gradescope, I've learned from my failures in the past that you should download it again and see if you can rerun your program. When I downloaded from Gradescope, it said that it can't be zipped, and I know a couple other people unzipped, and I know a couple other people that's happening with. I don't know if that's. I don't know what's going on.
I have a list of about 15 or 20 people who had problems, and the TAs have already emailed about 60% of them, and I asked them to email the rest about getting their code. But again, we will get the PS4 posted. We'll be working on PS5 starting tomorrow for grading. Midterms graded. PS6 we'll grade starting this weekend. But if we can't open your file for some reason, we will contact you and make sure that we get a copy. The one caveat there is a number of you have said, oh, I don't have my code from that anymore. So make sure that you version your code so that you can come back if you have to get it if you don't have a copy. Okay. So on the web scraper project, before we talk about the midterm, there have been a couple updates. Someone pointed out that having a space after the comma is a bad idea. So do not put spaces after the comma. It should be a trivial fix. And then there was a nice comment that said the course title appears different in different places, which is an interesting artifact of how the U puts its information out. So you should use the title from the catalog description page. And then finally, people are asking, well, do I have to save the file if I just go to one web page at a time? And the answer is no. If you're not doing the scraping enrollments for all the classes on a fall or spring semester, you do not have to save that data at all. So only plan to save when you are doing the enrollments part. Okay. Any other questions on that? Yeah.
So when it says, when you're scraping the enrollment information, does that mean how many students can enroll in the class? Or is that just a little prerequisites description of the enrollment information?
So let's pull that up and I'll show you. So the short answer is that if I go to the fall 2019 catalog and click on seating availability, the enrollment that I want is this currently enrolled column right here. So this number 183 for 1030.
You can't see it.
So again, if I go to the fall 2019 class schedule and go down and click seating availability for all CS classes. The number I want is this one right here that's in the currently enrolled column. Yes?
So along the lines of your last point about using the course title in the catalog description,
Yes.
we are supposed to filter for titles that include seminar special topics. Is it safe to assume that it's going to be safe to filter from that page, or should we filter from the other page?
Great, great question. Filter on this page. If it says special topics here, ignore it. Yeah. You don't have to leave this page if it's in that category. Yes?
Yeah, so another problem with the CSV thing that I come on is if the description has a comma, you know, in CSV it separates things by a comma.
It does.
You use quotation marks to make it into one thing. Are we supposed to be doing that, or do you want it without it?
So the question is, if a title has a comma in it, what do you do? And as you just pointed out, the correct answer is CSV requires you to put quotation marks around it. Yes.
While my program is running, it sometimes prints timed out connecting to Chrome and then retrying ... If nothing breaks, it just sometimes will print that on the console. Is that a problem, or is that just a common syntax?
So the question is, sometimes when his program's running on the console, it says timeout connecting to Chrome. And then the question was, is that a problem? The answer is, absolutely it's a problem. And the question is, who's it a problem for, and how much energy do you have to care about it? Right. Because I find we all find ourselves doing this. Like if we don't really understand a problem, we punt it and hope it doesn't hurt us. I hope you're nodding because we all do this. So the question is, if your program is working completely and you've run it several times, you've seen that but it hasn't caused any problems, then you don't really need to go into that. We're not going to see that and go, oh, minus 10 points or anything like that. But the real world answer is you would probably put one of your top design team members on it and say, what is going on? Because this could come back and hurt us at some point. And then the real world answer is your boss would probably say, oh, we don't have time for that. Let's just hope it doesn't come back to bite us. So always have to make those decisions.
A comment to that, that's why I came up to ask you about, and I was looking online and said that because the Chrome driver that we downloaded off and get the packages, it's not up to date. And so it's a problem with that package and no one's fixed it. So I don't know if...
Right, so one of the things here that's happening is the Selenium code is updating and Chrome is updating, and they probably tested them on a particular version of both Chrome and Selenium and it was working, and now Chrome is advanced. So one thing that people do in these situations is they'll actually keep old copies of Chrome around. So they'll unroll their most recent update and use the older version of Chrome. You're not required to do that. Again, I don't think it's going to cause you problems as you scrape data. If it does, come talk to me about it.
I've run into an issue with looking up the course descriptions because I'm assuming it's JavaScript that's running a tool that when I send key to search for whatever course I'm looking for a description, it'll pull up the result, and then after maybe about a second, it'll flip back to the old menu where it has all the departments and all that, and enter that word. You basically have to reload the web page.
Okay. First of all, I'll come here for 1 second. Someone posted a note saying, can we go directly to the page to get the information? And the answer is no. And the real reason is because I want you to play with Selenium and see how you click things and put stuff in. In the real world, the answer is yes, you go directly to the page, or better yet, you hope that they have an API that allows you to do requests directly to their data system saying, give us this information. Okay. So here is a great example of where we're scraping. So we are left with their system, right? And it turns out that I saw a post recently. I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. Hopefully they won't fire me. There's a post for a job offer for an IS software developer here at the University of Utah. And they're offering, I think this is for graduates with a CS degree, $55K as a starting salary. Like, you guys should not accept a salary of 55K. Now, not after finishing here. You should be in the 60, 65, or 70 range. So someone made a mistake, right? So the point was, if you come here and search 40, and you hit enter, this should come up. But every once in a while, there's something goes wrong where it reloads the main page without showing this page, right? Yeah. So now the neat thing is the JavaScript for doing that is in there, right? You could pull their JavaScript and look through it. In fact, if anyone wants to figure out why their code is bad, I will give you bonus points for that. So, if that happens, so like I think a lot of you have been auto-graded to death in other courses, am I right? So the purpose of the auto-grader is not to, on this assignment, make it so that we don't look at your code or look at your stuff and say you get 0 or 100 based on whether you exactly match this. And so I get a lot of people like, oh, if I have an extra space here, am I going to lose everything? No, the answer is no. The purpose of the auto-grader is to allow the TAs to quickly go, oh, this one works, it's pulling exactly what we want, great, I can check it off. But if it's not working, they can look in it and say, oh, look, there's an extra comma here. That's worth nothing, right? So no point deduction, or minus half a point or something. You know. So that the auto-grader is not there to punish you because we misspecified something or you misread something. It's there to speed up the TA's job. So if you go here and you search on this and it doesn't come up because it's jumped to the wrong web page, you'll get no response, you'll time out, and you'll go on to the next one, and your file will have one missing line. And the TAs are aware of this problem, and I will make them aware that when they're grading that they would not take off points for this. Okay? Other questions? Yeah?
For the CSV header, I believe a header row for the CSV file, I would say.
A header row for the CSV. I don't think I specified one. Did I specify header row? No. No header row. Yes?
In section 2.1, you're saying, given a course or a list of courses, find the course catalog description. So for a list of courses, should be, how do you think that would work?
For our purposes, the list of courses can be that enrollment page.
So do we just allow for one course?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you can just allow for one course. Any other questions? Yes.
So one way that I've thought about doing this is if it fails on this screen, it'll just throw, and then I'll catch and just kind of exit the program without continuing on the data. Is that a bad call?
That is a bad call.
All right, good to know.
And the reason it's a bad call, I mean, we're all used to these toy assignments where it's 3 or 4 things, you restart, it doesn't matter. But let's say you were running this for the entire history of the CS classes at the U, and it's going to take all night to run, and it throws an error, and then you have to rerun it from scratch. It takes another whole night to run. You want it to get as much data as possible.
Okay. I mean, I'm interested in it. I mean, I'm sure there's more creative ways to do it, but the way that I worked around it is that I cleared the box, and I kept putting it in until it finally caught it. I mean, it's like 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 times that it actually happens.
So, I mean, you could make the argument that if you found it on the enrollment page, it must be in the course catalog, right? And so you could keep re-polling over and over again. Again, you should just put a little note in your README to say this is my solution to the problem, so the TAs know you found it or you saw something. And this is not a big point of the assignment, fixing someone else's JavaScript mistakes. But it is a good real-world learning opportunity. All right, so we did questions. So the next is the midterm. So the midterm scores have been posted and put on Canvas. I have decided to curb the final scores by 6 points. And the reason for that is there are a lot of what I'm going to call gotchas. And it's not like I'm out there to get you, but there are lots of little misunderstandings in web software that I've noticed cause some of you an awful lot of time. Like some really just tiny, like do I put a parentheses here, do quotes go there? These kind of things are really hard to debug. So a lot of the questions will have small deductions on them, but the purpose was not to crush grades. So I've added 6 points to bring all those small deductions up. But they are there so that you can go back and review them and hopefully fill in those gaps or holes. The median grade, therefore, is going to be 89, so half the class got 89 or above, so that's pretty good. Average in 85, there's the histogram of scores on this. If you have a question on one of your grades, you can use GradeScope and ask for a regrade. Again, a lot of this, like some of the things, we took a quarter point off here or a half point off there. Please, we don't want to regrade every quarter point that you want to debate. Right? So if there's a big ticket issue, please put a regrade request. Otherwise, the 6 points hopefully will cover most of these things. All right. Okay, so I want to briefly go over some of the answers and the gotchas. If there's questions, feel free to ask and we can discuss them at this point. So we're going to go through the short answers and then I'll show you some code. So list 2 important HTML attributes that are common to all elements. And most people got these right. We were looking for ID and class. These are super important objects. What is a content delivery network and what's an advantage of using it? Well, it allows lots of people to share the same cache of code. That's one example. Or something goes wrong with the code, they can replace it in one place and it's fixed everywhere. So that's another example. Define the term full stack. This was something that a lot of people, like we were sort of niggly on this one. So you might have lost a point here where you think that you know what it is, but we just couldn't, we didn't know if you really knew. So we're looking for certain terms, like a full stack developer is someone who develops across the entire range of the project from the back end to the front end. The back end is the database, and maybe in our case a C# server. The front end is usually HTML and JavaScript. So we're looking for a little bit more than a full stack is everything that the program is. Okay. Define dependency injection and describe the software engineering goal it addresses. So dependency injection is this ability to get a global object anywhere in your code that you need it. And the example is the database. Many of our classes controllers need databases, so we can, in the constructor, say I need a database, and it just magically shows up in the constructor. That's dependency injection. It's not magic, it's like having a giant global variable that's easy to access. What is one important use of app settings.json? Should probably rephrase like why is app settings.json important and what is one thing inside of it? But what we're looking there is we are looking for this idea that some things, some global constants need to be specified for your program, and it's better to do it outside of your code. For example, the database, the name of the database, location of the database, the connection string to the database is something that should be specified outside of the code. And that's what app settings.json allows you to do. Now, why are things better specified outside of code? Why not just specify it in the code? The question is you don't have to version control it. App settings is version control, so it's along those lines. I think you're thinking the right thing, but I'm looking at something slightly different.
You have different environments, like you have a test environment and an actual production environment. You don't have to change the code to redeploy for production. You can just change it in the app settings and point to the database where your production is going to test.
So the answer here is that you could have a deployment and a test version, and they could have different database strings inside of app settings. And that is exactly true, except it is not the right answer either. Because I could hard code those in my code. I could say if def developer mode in my code, use the developer string, else if test mode. So I could do it directly in code. So why put it there? And the short answer is it's easy for a non-developer to change. I don't want to have to recompile a giant program because the password on the database changed. I don't want to have to search through the entire file, all the files looking for the place where I used the password. I want to go to this one standardized space and change it there, and then the program will run without even recompiling. We're not looking for all of that in the box. What is the ASP core root? Simply looking for, this is where you store static files like JavaScript or CSS or other files you want to deliver from your web page. Web cookies, we really talked a lot about that during our review for the test, but we were looking for stuff about cookies have a key value pair, and they're always transmitted every time you make a request to the server. They have an expiration. They can be HTTP only, which means what? JavaScript cannot access it. It's a security issue. They can be secure, which means they only are sent over encrypted channels. So those are the type of things we're looking for cookies. And there are a number of others that if you got the same credit as any of those. What are get and post? They're both ways to send requests for data. Get usually says, hey, I want to get something, I want to return it. Post usually says, I want to set something. But in both cases, you're sending data to the web server to take an action. The get data is sent through the URL. The post data is sent through the body. The next one, what are 5 high-level steps necessary to make code first work? This was sort of a pain to grade because we're looking for certain things and you might have gone down a different path. This is one where, again, the curve is supposed to help out when things were slightly different. But, like I said, first thing you do is define the class that represents the data, or row in the data table, which also defines the table. There are lots of other things that you have to do to make code first work. What are some of those things? What is one thing you have to do?
Update database to conform to that model.
You have to update the database. And you can either do that in code or on the command line. Yeah? But before you can update the database, because you don't have a database, when you've just defined one table, you don't have a database. What do you have to do? You have to do add migration as well. But before you can add a migration, you have to have a database.
You have to do the DB context to create models.
You have to define the DB context. That's right. You have to say the database has this table and this table and this table. But you don't say tables. You say this list of items and this list of items and this list of items. Okay, so those are the things. We define the database context. We add the migration. We update it. If you had said something also about maybe seeding the data, that's okay. But you don't need to seed the data just in code first. If you did databases first, you could also seed the data. All right, what's the include statement for Entity Framework? Most people got this. Sometimes you're looking for a little more than what you gave, but the include statement is when two objects are linked, two separate data tables are linked. For example, a course has a list of students, and you want to make sure that when you load the course, you load all of the students associated with the course. If you use the word eager loading, that would be even better for that. Okay, number 5 JavaScript and jQuery. Oh man, this is one I graded. This one I just like raked you all over the coals with. So let's actually look at this. This was supposed to be a really, like all the questions that go wrong, it's supposed to be straightforward. It wasn't. Okay, so the first thing is we are in the head segment of the program. Okay. Where's the head segment of the program? Straightforward question. Where's the head section of the HTML file? Yeah, it's at the top. It's at the top. The head is at the top, the body is below. Head and body. Head is on top of the body. Okay, so one thing that many of you, about half you did, but half you didn't, is you started typing JavaScript without telling the program that it is JavaScript. And what happens if you don't put the script tags in? Well, it just puts your JavaScript on the page. You have to have the script tags. So that was an important aspect. Okay. Now, most of you, when it said every paragraph, you immediately thought this. Every paragraph. And that's exactly right. Okay. At this point, as you're loading your loading your web page, how many paragraphs are in the document? Say it loud.
0.
0. Do I have any other guesses? Does everyone agree at this point in loading the web page there are 0 paragraphs? Does anyone disagree? Okay, so then what is $P going to return? Nothing. Absolutely nothing at all, right? So, the one thing almost everybody missed, I would say maybe 10%, and again, this is why we're curving this, at least one point of that curve goes right here, is we have to say the following. What that does is make sure that the web page is loaded before you do anything else. So this question was really, it was, a lot of those were like just regurgitate answers. This one you actually had to think, and so maybe I should not have thrown it in the short answer because it really did take thinking. Okay, now it said add a click function. Now a lot of you tried different things like converting paragraphs. We were looking for anything that, the correct answer is click, but we're looking, if you put on click or add click or anything like that, you should have got most of the credit for this part. And then it said, with a function, do it. Now, a number of people read with a function, do it, and so they put this whole thing inside a function, do it. And if you did that, I can understand how you misread the question. So, again, that's one reason we're curving on this exam. But what we're looking for is the script tag, the onload, make sure the whole document is loaded, search for paragraphs, and then add click to it. Okay. All right, finally, what is CRUD? And most of you just wrote create, read, update, delete, and you got full credit for it. It was nice if you actually said a few more words, like these are actions we do to data objects. That would have been nice, but I assumed that if you could remember CRUD, you knew what that was. Okay. All right, onward to the coding part. Again, for all of these, we were looking for high-level concepts with ASP Core. We weren't looking for syntax. Syntax was worth a tiny bit of the question. So the first one was write a high-score controller. So high-score controller. First of all, I said you don't need any of this stuff up here. I did say that you need to be authorized to use this class, so you should have had the keyword authorized at the top of your controller. I have it commented out here because this is a simple test to show you how it looks without, and I don't have the authorization working. Okay, number 2, dependency injection. Somehow the database had to get into your controller. So we're looking for these lines of code, and if you didn't have code, you put pseudocode saying I need the database, then you should have gotten credit for knowing that the database has to come into the controller. The next part was we needed the index view. So here's the main index view. And it's pretty straightforward. Return view, most of you got that part. In the database, go to the high scores table. One thing a number of you did not do is the following. You did not order the scores. So you just got 10 scores, which is okay, except if you want a high scores list, 10 random scores is not going to do it. You have to somehow put them in order. So some sort of ordering by. I told you to take 10, so most of you got that, and then you throw that to a list or something. And that's what we're looking for the index. What we're going to use for our AJAX was authorized by players, and so we used authorized roles equal player. It was posted, so you need that HTTP post stuff. And then I was looking for something like this. Give me a new high score, add it to the database, and then save the changes of the database. And then the last part was return a JSON object. Again, we were looking for this idea of you have to create an object, put it in the database, return JSON. A lot of you didn't get the syntax right, but you got most of the points for that anyway. A number of you looked up the high score to see if it existed already, or if that player already had a high score. And if you did that in a reasonable way, you got most of the credit for this part as well. A number of people, though, looked up the score and then updated it. What is the problem with looking up the score and updating it? What is the problem with looking up the score and then updating it?
One player could be on the high scores list multiple times.
If you look up their score already and you update it and change it, then they'd only be on it once. But yes, if you wanted to be on this high score multiple times, that would not work. But that was not the issue I was worried about. It's a good one, though. What is the problem if you look up someone's high score and try to update it? Let's pretend that we just released our software and this is the first time anyone's ever played. What happens when we look up their...
If it doesn't exist.
If it doesn't exist, what do you have to do? To do that, right? So you still have to do that code. So if you looked it up, you needed to make sure that it wasn't null before you updated it. All right. And that's what we're looking for this controller. Again, I think the average on here was 80, 85%. So most people got most of what it takes to be a controller in code. The next question was, what does the view look like? And here we are looking for your ability to do some razor syntax. Okay. Number one, and perhaps the most important part, is we are in an MVC model view controller. The view needs the model. You have to have a model that goes into the view of some sort. I'm sorry, I missed your question.
Back to the
controller? Yeah.
In the Gradescope, it says there's 3 points for checking the previous score, and I think I got points taken off because of that.
Yeah, just show me at some point. We'll take a look at it. Okay, so the first thing was looking at a model. The next part of this question was sort of to see, can you write basic HTML, not complicated HTML. Table should have a head and a body. The head should have the columns, headers, and to put the name for a header, you should have put the model name and the model score name. I think, and you can look on there, it's like, is it 1 point or half a point for using display name? I forget. But it's a very small amount for using the display name. If you just put name and score, you were fine. A lot of you then, almost everyone got the for each statement for every item in the model. And here, I'm just keeping track of even and odd parity. You were told to put the ID for each row, a unique ID. A lot of you did this, though a lot of you did not have the row underscore, you just said @I. What is wrong with ID equals @I?
IDs can't be numbers.
IDs cannot be numbers. For whatever reason, that's true. Yeah.
Is it true that IDs can be numbers if they're like stringified, like if there's double quotes around numbers?
I do not think so. Not a huge issue. The other thing was you needed to mark each row as whether it was odd or even. And a lot of interesting ideas on how to mark a row. Some people actually, in the table itself, printed even and odd after each row. And in some way you could argue I've marked them. But have any of you ever gone to a web page that has color-coded odd and even rows and seen odd and even written down? No, I don't think you have, right? So a number of you created your own attribute called even or odd. You just put even or odd directly into the HTML. And, maybe, but almost always when we're talking about marking something, we're going to use either the ID property or the class property. And so class was really the place where you should have put odd or even, because then it can be used by CSS or JavaScript to make your table do whatever you want it to do. So we're looking for the class attribute. Okay. So basically, this is the core of what we were looking for with the model thing at the top. Questions? And a lot of people got pretty close in many aspects of this. Okay, the next question was on Ajax and suite alerts. So it said, write a single JavaScript function called transmit data, which takes in a string and an integer. Okay, so there's the function transmit data that takes in a string and an integer, the name of the score. Using jQuery and Ajax, post the score. All right, so here's the things we're looking for. First of all, in order to use jQuery's Ajax, you need $.ajax. And then these are very important elements. You need to tell it where you're going to post it, whether it's a GET or a POST, and the data that you're sending. So I think that's worth 2 points or 3 points on that question. The next part was you needed to take an action when it was done, and the action was to print something to the console. So you're just looking for console.log. This stuff you don't need. In my simple example, I wanted to reload the page every time I updated a score, so I just used this document location reload, which is a clever way to do that, but not part of the question. If something went wrong, we were looking for suite alerts, and many of you had suite alert.fire and some combination of error, title, text, or something. But again, as long as there was something that looked reasonable, you got credit for that. And so this was the answer we were looking for the transmit data. Again, the important parts, where and type, the data, the type, and the URL, where you're going, what happens when you're successful, what happens when you fail, and you know the basics of the suite alert. All right, and then the last question was Selenium. So here, again, we were looking for the main components, and if you put pseudocode down, you would get some of the credit for this. The first thing was you needed a web driver, so a new Chrome driver in this case. The second thing is you needed to say that it can't wait for more than 10 seconds, so this is the actual syntax. And as long as you said something about wait and the syntax told the TA that was what you were thinking, you got credit for that. You needed to know that you could navigate to a URL. One thing many people did not put is the try-catch block. So if something goes wrong, if it times out or cannot find the elements, you need a way of handling that. So try-catch is important to this. And then what we're looking for is find element by ID, find row 1. And then at that point, most of you just did something like, does the text equal 1,000 or does the value equal 1,000? And most of that was okay. It turns out if you really want to get that second column, you have to do something like this. From that original row, find the second TD element. But we're not expecting anything accurate like that. As long as you had something like check for the text or the value. All right, and that was the test. Like I said, half of you got 89 or above, so I'm pretty happy with that result. There are a number of little gotchas. You should go look back at your exam and say, oh, I should have done that, or oh, that makes sense now. But the curve is there to alleviate those from hurting your grade, because I get it. You're not going to code real stuff without access to an IDE and the internet and templates and stuff. So going by memory is the important part of memory is to know the key elements, and then you can look up the actual syntax. What? All right, final project. The final project specifications will be posted at the end of this week. Your team and your idea are due on Monday. So you need to figure out who your team is and what you want to do, and we'll talk about that a little now. The project will be due December 6th, at which point you will display it to me and or the teaching staff. on the class. Okay, a few things about it. The topics, and there's a clicker question on this. If you can bring up the clickers, I'd like to get your feedback. So here's some opportunities. One is you take the Learning Outcome Tracker as a team and you add more functionality to it. Perfectly good. You have a base set of code. It's a perfectly good project. You just think of what would be the next step, what are interesting things we could do. That would be something. Number two, maybe you have some idea for a web application that you already like. Maybe some of you maybe some of you coach a soccer team and would like to keep track of scores of your games or something. You want to make a little web app to do that. That would be perfectly fine as well. It should have about the complexity of the Learning Outcome Tracker. This week we're going to talk about using JavaScript to make some really neat front-end things, some games, some animations, some physics simulations. Maybe you've always wanted to write a really cool, short, small game because it's only 4 weeks, but you'd like to do that in JavaScript. You still need a back end, like if you make a game, you'd have to have a scoreboard or something, but that's an opportunity. And then if you have some other idea, you should talk to me and make sure that I think it's reasonable and you can go forward. So please give me on the clickers what you think you might be doing. Likewise, your team, I decided the team should be 3 people. If you only have 2 people and you want to work just together, you can't find a third, you'll still be expected to do something significant. On the other hand, if you want 4 people on your team, you better have a really good idea and be willing to do a lot of extra work. But the idea is to have 3 people. So please, on the clicker question, tell me, do you already have 3 people that you know you want to work with? Do you have 2 people and you're looking for a third? Do you plan to only work with the same person? Do you have 4 people? Like, what is your status so that I can see where we are by Wednesday? Okay, any questions on the final project? Yes?
Does it have to be could it be any framework that we choose?
The question is, could it be any framework you choose? You would have to do a lot of convincing. And you have to convince me that your entire team was able to, I'm not looking for learning all the things we've already learned on another framework. You'd already have to be using that framework somewhere else and your whole team would have to use it. So in general, it's a C# framework, the ES6. One thing that we will be doing next week is investigating Amazon Web Services. And so at the end of the semester, you will be required to post your application to the web for maybe a week while we grade it. So that should be fun to do. So whatever you do, and everything we've done so far is almost a button push away to put on the web. So that would be something that you can expect to happen. No questions? No one's really thought about it. Yeah.
The final project, are you looking for I guess, what's the weighting towards a really complicated one-page web app versus an in-depth site that has lots of links and stuff like that?
So each person on the team is going to have to propose a key feature idea that they're going to do, and you've got 4 weeks. So what can be accomplished in 4 weeks? So I would say, roughly on par with getting, something that you can accomplish over 4 weeks. That's what you'd have to come up with. And so if it's, if you wanted to make, for example, a Tetris game, I think one person could design the GUI and the falling pieces in 4 weeks, and then another person might be able to do the back end, the users, the scoreboard, that sort of stuff in 4 weeks, and then you have to find something else for the third person to do. Okay, so onward. Canvas, drawing stuff, HTML5, Pixie, that's what we're going to talk about. JavaScript, making a browser do incredible things. So real quick, I wanted to go on writing software engineering principles for JavaScript objects. And so we've used JSON for sending data. We already know that JavaScript objects exist, but how can you use them when you want to write real code that's going to have real values? And one way is to use the actual ECMA script, ES6 script. Now let's talk a little bit. Here's the old way for defining an object. So if I wanted a mango fruit, I'd use JSON and say the color is yellow, the shape is round, and the sweetness is 8. Now, notice this is a single fruit, and if I wanted to add more functionality to it or get a different fruit, I'd have to repeat this code or do something strange with it. So it doesn't give me a lot of software engineering power. One thing we haven't done is add functionality to an object like this. So did you know that when you're defining your JSON, you can throw a function right into it? Maybe not. That's pretty cool. If I wanted to add a getName function to my fruit, I can just write in line, say getName is a function, and return this name. So you've got the very basic building blocks of what is object-oriented programming. You also have constructors. So this is really weird. I love this when I first came across it. And by the way, these are all old ways of doing things. And the reason we're learning about old ways is there's a ton of old JavaScript out there that's got to be maintained and used and updated, and so you need to know it. But I can declare a JavaScript function for a student, for example, and then I can say object equals new student. I can call a function as if it's a constructor for an object and get an object back out of it. Wow. Yeah. You can also use inheritance in JavaScript. So if I had a student object and I wanted it to inherit from a person object, I would use this wonderful syntax, student.prototype equals object.createPerson. So there's a prototype field inside of my object that can store other objects. So hopefully from your C# classes, and maybe even a few of you have paid attention in the assembly language or taken compilers, how do you normally build an object in memory? How do you build an object in memory? Did anyone take compilers, by the way? We got it. No one's taking compilers? Oh, you have? How do you build an object in memory?
You determine what is the type and then what are the fields within it that will be filled and how much you type on those fields.
That's right. You allocate a block of memory that's based on all the type sizes. Yeah. But what if it inherits from something? What do you do?
You have to, what do you do?
Yeah. Usually, depending on the language, you take the objects, the parent object's data and the child object's data, and they become continuous in memory. JavaScript, on the other hand, it builds a linked list of stuff. So you can build this prototype as a linked list of information about the object. You can also you can set a constructor for the superclass, but it's really not very apparent. We're not used to this syntax in JavaScript. And so then, ES6 came up, and ES6 said, let's get rid of all that ugly notation, and let's treat JavaScript as if it was a real language, and give it what everyone's used to, classes. So if I want to build a student object, I just say class student, and then I say I want a constructor, I use the keyword constructor. So I want to walk through some examples of using this notation, so let's go take a look at this. Okay, so here's the definition of ES6 classes, and you'll see that it looks a lot like what you might expect in a real language. So here we're building a rectangle. A rectangle has a constructor that takes in the height, width, and then you use this.height equals height, this.width equals width. So there's some things that are different from a real language. By real, I mean something like C# or Java. Right? JavaScript is obviously a real language. But what's the difference here between a typed language, for example? That was a hint. What's the difference here between a typed language? The front row is really active today, but the back row is not very exciting. Types, yeah, there's no types in there. What else is different up there? There's something fundamentally different here. This is defining the height and width of a rectangle. What's fundamentally different between the Java notation or C# notation and this notation? Yeah, what do you see?
You don't define the variables outside of the constructor.
Yeah, by saying this dot height, boom, now you have a height variable. Isn't that cool? So how do you know what all the fields of the rectangle are? You have to look through that code in the constructor to find this dot something, and there are your variables. There are your fields. I don't like it either. But we'll come back to that in a second.
Is there a reason the constructor notation isn't a bit more, more like conventional? It's closer to like real object-oriented languages, but why not just make it exactly like that?
Well, for one, JavaScript is not typed, and so putting the types in is different. But we'll actually see that it becomes a little closer in a second. Okay, let's see some other things. So it turns out that you can define a class inline. So we haven't been exposed to the let statement, have we? How many people know the let statement? How many people don't know the let statement? Yeah. How many people don't know the var statement? What does var do? It defines a variable. That's right. Var defines a variable. Guess what let does? It defines a variable. Isn't that exciting? We have two words that define variables, let and var. So there must be something different.
What does const do? Like, there's let, var, and const.
Const makes a constant variable. Yeah, just like we'd expect. So let and var both declare variables. What's the difference? Yeah, what do you think?
So let is stricter in that the variable that it defines lives within the scope that you define it in, whereas var allows you to go beyond that scope.
Okay, if you could hear down the front, everybody remember scoping? If you have a curly brace, another curly brace, variables live between the curly braces, right? So let does that. But the var keyword in JavaScript, those variables live beyond the scope of the curly braces. So if you want your variable to die once it leaves scope, then use let. It's a better way. That being said, there are a bunch of old-timer JavaScript developers who are going to use var for everything no matter what. So you don't have to use let, it's just better. Okay, so I will say that you can define a class as a variable. That's pretty cool. You know, it's a scripting language. You can do lots of exciting things. Strict mode. So at the top of your class in JavaScript, you can put strict. And what that does is it tells the browser, hey, I'm tired of my team being a bunch of lazy developers. When they do something sloppy, shut them down. Yeah. So in C++ or in GNU compiler, what's the equivalent of strict? Didn't you all take 3505? Isn't there command line variable G++? Do you use G++? Yeah. G++ dash nothing? Wall? I heard wall. Wall is a good one. All warnings on. What's the difference between, does wall stop you from compiling bad code? No, it just tells you warnings, right? So isn't there a G++ command that says treat all warnings as errors? I believe there is. Of course, as a smart computer scientist, I no longer program in C or C++. So. Okay, strict mode is something you should put at the top of all your JavaScript because it allows the environment, the browser, when it's parsing it, to give you feedback quicker when you do something wrong. Constructors, we saw that. Let's see. Static methods. So we know about static methods from C#. You can do static methods inside of a, for example, point class here, so that's pretty good. We want to talk about boxing. We will talk about properties. So we already saw properties here. Oh, okay. So this is neat. JavaScript is always updating. So this slide, this definition is different from the last time I taught this class a couple years ago. So we're back here talking about how finding width and height down in the code was a real pain. Everyone agreed this was a terrible idea, and so now you can actually define the variables at the top of the class just like you would do in Java or C#. So it gets better. It's not as bad as it seemed. Now, one of the things, as soon as we start declining things, we don't have types, but there's another definition that goes right next to, like when we said int height or float height, what's the thing that goes in front of float? What's that?
The scope.
The scope is the entire object. Oh, public, oh yes, public or private, yeah. And it turns out software engineering, public and private are important. By the way, does the compiler care about public and private? No, it doesn't. I mean, if you violate the public and private, it does tell you that's an error. But when it generates the code, it doesn't care about public and private at that point. The actual machine code doesn't have anything to do with public and private. Public and private are there to help engineers make better code. And so for the longest time, we did not have public or private in JavaScript, so what did we do? Does anyone know what people did? I'll give you a hint. They did weird things like put underscores in front of the names. So they used name declarations like, if you put an underscore in front of the name, that means it's private, which means you shouldn't use it where it is not accessible. What happens when you tell an engineer or a developer you shouldn't do this? Right. Someone is going to change, someone's going to decide I need that data, and it's not a bad idea. I'm just going to reach into that object and take the private data out because I can. So it turns out that private field declarations are now supported. How do you do it? You put the hashtag octothorpe in front of your variable. Yeah, that makes it private. Of course, so I was playing with this. I didn't read carefully because I'm like most of you and I like to read. So I put this up here to make it private, and then I didn't put it in the code because like, surely you don't have to put the private thing down in the code. Well, it turns out, yes, you do. You have to put the hashtag inside your code everywhere you use it, which reminds you that it's private, which I guess is okay. Which brings us to a point that I made earlier in the year is, where does this stuff work? What does that mean when I talk about JavaScript? Where does this stuff work? What does that question mean? Where does this stuff work?
Where it executes the code?
Where it executes the code, is that what you said? Yeah. Yeah, where does it execute the code? In the browser. So I say in the browser, right? Because the browser is the definitive standard. Correct? There is the browser, right? It's like the church. Catholicism, of course. The browser. No, there is no the browser. There is what? There's Chrome, there's Safari, there's Firefox, there's Edge, there's Windows Explorer, and there's others. So where does this work? That means, does it work in Chrome? Does it work in Firefox? Does it work in Edge? Does it work in all of these things? I don't know. How would you know that? Well, one way is you just run it on those browsers. You have a whole test team. Each person has their own version. You test them all. The other is, and I'll come back to extends. Look down here. What is this? Browser compatibility. It turns out that all of these things Chrome supports. Yay, Chrome! What other browsers do we have here? Oh, Internet Explorer basically doesn't do anything. That's not fair, right? That's because Microsoft has gone to Edge. So, oh, Edge doesn't support stuff either, private. Yeah. Because what does Microsoft know about software engineering? Delete that from the tape. But yeah, so you can see here where if you're using these advanced tools, like I said, when I was making these slides, when I was using this talk about classes a couple years ago, none of this existed, no private or public. Now everything's changed, but it only changed for a certain subset of browsers. You have to know what your browser is capable of and what your target browser is. Okay,